Welcome to the Double Feature Podcast. I'm Dean, joined by the more talented host. Introduce yourself, sir.
I am David. Welcome to the Double Feature Podcast, everybody.
All right.
First episode literally took blood, sweat, and tears to get here, minus the blood.
Yeah,
But that's a story for a different day.
it's true. All right. So today we have the battle of two of the greatest films of the 1980s. Two films
That's
films?
Battle of the Blockbusters. We got two of the greatest films from the 80s being Back to the Future and
Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, the big question we are going to decide here today, which of these is the better 80s blockbuster? Which one still holds up, still has more impact, and which one's just generally a better movie? But before we get to that, David, why don't you tell us stuff about the movie?
Right, so Back to the Future, we got Marty McFly being sent back into the past, 1955, in order to rekindle his parents' love for each other. Doc Brown, being chased around by living terrorists, forces Marty to take the DeLorean on a test ride back to the past, in which he then has to save his parents' marriage in the form of almost dating his mom and teaching his dad to punch somebody in the face.
It's pretty good. And our other movie,
Raiders of the Lost Ark, featuring Indiana Jones. Not title namesake for this movie for some weird reason.
It's
but
true.
Indiana Jones having to recover the Lost Ark of the Covenant from Nazis pre-World War II. So the U.S. government doesn't help him the entire movie, even though they have sent him on this mission against a literal army of Nazis. And then through the whole movie, he uncovers the power of God, love, and a hate for monkeys.
Nazi spy monkeys.
Nazi spy monkeys, yeah.
All right. So, David, I assume you've seen both these movies before today.
Yeah, so Back to the Future, I told you I had a story about when I first saw it, was a Blockbuster story. When I was a kid, we were probably part of the last generation to actually have Blockbuster around. And
yeah,
they were going out of business. I remember it probably had to have been at least 2006 or 7. And my aunt takes me to Blockbuster to pick out some movies while I'm staying at her house. And she happens to pick out Back to the Future because I had never seen it. And I'm sitting there like, I don't know what this movie is. You know, at 8 years old, you hate everything. So we pick out the movie and we go home and we watch it on her regular normal TV. But I love it so much that I'm like, we got to go back. We got to go back. I need to see the other two movies after finding out that there were two other movies in the trilogy. And I watched them in the dark in her room on a portable DVD player, another technology lost to time.
Wow.
Yeah. And I finished them both in the same day. It really had an impression on me because these movies really capture a whimsical wonder about the story that they're telling. Yeah, iconic.
Nice.
What about you? When was the first time you saw this?
I probably saw Back to the Future when I was like, because I know I saw it on VHS. That is how long ago I saw this movie. I was probably like 3 or 4, because this is the first movie I have like vivid memories of like ever watching. Like this was like whenever people ask, like, this is like the first movie I know I saw as a kid. So like probably around 3 or 4, like maybe 5. I don't really think I was probably that old when I saw it, but yeah. But more or less the same story. We probably went to a Blockbuster and my parents picked it up because they just wanted something to put on so I would stop annoying them. And we, watched it and it became my favorite movie. Like, I love that movie.
Something about it that really gets me is the fascination with the plot, right? Everybody remembers this movie about being a guy having to go back to the past and figure all that out and figure out all the butterfly effect stuff.
The comedy stuff, the light stuff.
But it's like in the middle of it, it's not taken so seriously that the time travel stuff gets in the way of trying to enjoy the story. And for me, what really catches me about it every time I watch it is that soundtrack. Um, like the every now and again during the quiet moments when there's the little piano, the descending piano that like kind of tickles at your brain.
The little tiny like
yeah,
music
it's like
cues.
it's
Also,
really I love the deja vu effect, the serendipity that it has. That you can kind of feel Marty going through, because a movie is nothing without its soundtrack. That's for sure. That's something we'll learn with Raiders.
look, this I will say this about its soundtrack. The
Yeah.
main theme of this movie, the power of love, still holds up today. That song is a banger, all right?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
And the funny thing I learned while researching it too was that apparently the guy who wrote it, Huey Lewis,
He's in the movie.
He's in the movie as the guy who tells Marty that his band is too damn loud. Which is funny because the whole problem was that in Ghostbusters, there was that famous lawsuit where Huey Lewis sued the songwriters and performers of the Ghostbusters theme, who you going to call?
Yeah.
Because it sounded too much like one of his songs that he wrote. So the deal then became that he wanted to try and get on the soundtrack of a movie in order to make more money. And this was the convenient way he was able to do that, thus parlaying into the cameo in the movie. But it was definitely like I don't know, I think that one in its own way is secretly more iconic than the Ghostbusters one or any other cheesy 80s rock songs that were part of a soundtrack in that decade.
I mean, there's some banging like 80s rock song movie tracks though, like but yeah, I will say above in all 80s, in the plethora of great 80s like original movie songs, like Power of Love is like up there. And also you have like Back in Time, that's like the end song that's in the movie that no one remembers. Everything's that's the theme, but it's not as Power of Love. But
yeah. The other interesting thing I want to point out about this movie, obviously, is that it's popular nowadays for people to point out plot holes all over movies, right?
Yeah.
Plot hole here, plot hole there. Well, why didn't the writers catch this? Listen, first of all, when you're dealing with a movie that's about a guy going back in time inside of a like shitty sports car,
the DeLorean is not a shitty sports car, sir. The DeLorean is the peak.
It's a shitty sports
class.
car because another interesting thing is that the top speed of a DeLorean is 85 miles an hour. So they had to literally like custom make the speedometer to 95 miles an hour because it wouldn't get to 88. Which also begs the question, why didn't they just make it 77 miles an hour? But 88, I guess, is a little bit more intimidating. Either way,
sure.
I just think it's funny that whenever people watch these movies and they try to pick out plot holes, it's like, well, what do you expect? You're watching a movie about a guy who almost sleeps with his mom. It's like you're really expecting this to be a Christopher Nolan-esque, airtight movie. But, it's airtight in its own specific way because this story really is well crafted.
Honestly, that's an interesting thing. So the script for this movie, like when you watch it and like every little like detail and line in like the first act of the movie gets paid off and comes back to in acts 2 and 3, like the lady who gives Marty the flyer saying, "Oh, the clock tower," that literally ties into the plot. Wherein like now he knows like when the lightning's gonna strike for him to get back to the future to power up the DeLorean. The fact that through the whole first act of the movie we see the high school when it's all like beat up in 1985. We see the town square where it's all like trashed out with like 5 porno theaters.
Yeah, they're very, very public porno theaters in the middle of the town.
Yeah.
Interesting choice by the mayor.
Life happens, Goldie Wilson for mayor, boys. But yeah, and like the whole thing, and then when it goes back to 1955, it's like an immediate like tonal shift, and like everything looks different. And like all the things that like George and Lorraine say about like their past or the Enchantment of the Sea dance and how they met and everything like that, it's all very like organic, and it really works. Like I think that's why this script is used at USC to teach like the perfect screenplay.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. I've read that first draft of the screenplay that's, floating around the internet. And it is different from the one that eventually made the movie. I mean, most first drafts are. I mean, that's how all movies start out. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see the changes they make from that first draft to the movie, because the intro in that draft is completely different. With the draft opens up on Marty in the classroom, and there's the reflection in some aviators of a nuclear test movie playing during a study hall or whatever. And that it's like it's very stylized in a way where it's supposed to show, I'm sure, like 1985 and the Cold War and all that. But I really like the one they ended up choosing, where it nails the style of the movie, the character, the set design, even all in that first bit with the clocks and the elaborate. I don't even remember the name of what that type of machine is called, but
the Rube Goldberg machine.
Rube Goldberg machine.
Why does Doc has a Rube Goldberg machine to feed his dog?
He can't help himself. He's too busy figuring out how to invent time travel. You think he's got time to feed a dog?
I mean, maybe.
I mean, more to the point is that why does he have it set up to feed the dog when the dog is with him figuring out how to time travel?
Yeah, like why didn't he just turn that off? Because it looks like there's just dog food and shit just all over like that bowl. Or like That's weird. No, better question. Why does Doc has a 7-foot tall like amplifier in like just the middle of his living room?
It's the 80s, dude. You got to party on.
Party on, Wayne, I guess. Yeah. Like that was one of the things in the movie that I was watching, and I'm like, okay, I like it because it's like it's cool, there's an explosion, it's funny, I get a laugh out of it, but I'm like, why does he have an amp that is floor to ceiling that you could literally drive like a Buick through? Why is that in his living room?
More importantly, when the amp turns on, it could literally blow a Buick across the street, because that I know it's for exaggerated effect because it's a fucking movie, but that thing's huge. It's like, I can't even imagine. It'd be like jet engine sounds coming out of that thing, which is of course what happens to Marty when he's blown clear across the room. But
also Marty just stands in front of this thing like John Wayne about to draw his gun holding his tiny ass guitar. Which also that guitar does not seem practical at all. It is way too small. But
no, it's kind of dorky, really. I mean, it just seems like tiny hands kind of guitar. It's a little weird.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking like, what was Marty expecting? Was he just gonna like just shred on this guitar in front of this giant amp and expect not to like go deaf immediately? Because he cranked everything up to 11. Like.
Who knows? I mean, he had to have keys to even start the damn thing, so who knows what he was expecting. Interesting point, too, that I wanted to point out about that amp, as we will point out throughout the talking about the story, is that when he does put the keys into the amp, the label on the key activation is the CRM 114, which is actually a paying homage to Stanley Kubrick. That app happens to show up in a lot of, or 3 of his movies, that being 2001. I think the other one is Clockwork Orange, and
it's one of those like random weird number sequences that he just puts in like all of his movies.
Yeah, one of those Easter eggs that it's like I tried to figure out what it was, but I couldn't find anything. It doesn't seem that anybody else seems to know. I mean, if anybody does know, let us know. But it's like, it's such a weird thing to pay homage to. And they pay homage to a lot of things in this movie. Robert Zemeckis had a lot of influences when coming up with and refining the story. One of them being, I think, Peabody and Sullivan episode or whatever.
Or Peabody and Sherman.
Yeah, Peabody Sherman. And on the mailbox, the farmhouse, the family's name is Peabody. And even in the credits, the
kid's name is Sherman.
Yeah, the kid's name is Sherman Peabody. So it's kind of interesting how many things they really cram into this to give credit to where they got their inspiration from.
Oh, yeah. Well, honestly, like this is really interesting because I think this is a good movie that's a good reason to say it's like, hey, if you just give like the directors and the creative team just kind of like carte blanche to just make a movie, like it'll be a good movie. Because I know Steven Spielberg produced this film. He was the producer on it. They got money from like Universal and all this other stuff. But from what I understand, like Robert Zemeckis had like a lot of free reign to just kind of do whatever with the film. Like it was his own script that he co-wrote with another person. But directing the movie, he didn't have to really answer to a lot of producers, from what like my understanding is.
Yeah, I think the only time that they ever had to answer somebody was probably the most critical way you could have to answer to somebody. They had to go to the head of, I believe it was Universal Studios. I could be wrong about that, because he wanted a title change, and he wanted to be something like Boy from the Planet Pluto or something like that, something really stupid. And then Spielberg was like, I can't believe he wants us to fucking change this because this is awful. So apparently he tried to play it off as a joke so that the executive would be like too embarrassed to correct him. And it worked.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of weird because this is a commercial movie at its core. It really is. It's a blockbuster. But it's interesting to see how when you give directors that free reign, they end up making something that's super fun. It's super memorable.
Oh yeah. Honestly, the biggest thing that's so like good about this movie that I think is just so glossed over by a lot of people is that the cast in this movie is perfect.
Spot on, yeah.
Everyone in this movie is like, not only turns in like a great performance, like some of them turn in like iconic performance. Like I legitimately cannot see any other actor playing Doc Brown, playing Biff. I can't even, or anybody playing Marty for that matter. And we got real close to seeing Eric Stoltz play Marty. Like apparently they shot like a good chunk of the movie before they kicked Eric Stoltz off and got Marty McFly, and got Michael J. Fox.
Yeah. Because wasn't he on like a sitcom at the time?
Michael J. Fox was at, he worked on Family Ties, I think is what it was, ? And he was like the director's like first choice to be Marty McFly, but Michael J. Fox is like, yo, I'm trying to get out of this thing. I don't know if I can, blah, blah, blah. So they started shooting with Eric Stoltz, and he was going to be Marty McFly. And then Michael J. Fox is like, hey, my producers on the show say I can be in the movie, but I can only shoot on my days off and at night.
Yeah, because I do remember stories of how they had to like cart him from that set over to the movie set. They'd shoot, and then he'd only get like 2 to 3 hours of sleep every night. And he still turns out like a really energetic performance. It's
great.
It's kind of interesting to think about too, because it's a commercial movie, it's a blockbuster, but then it's like to turn out something that's so charismatic with putting on that workload is super hard. And it's super hard to do it the right way, because acting isn't just any walk in the park, as I'm sure I'm obviously stating, but it's like everybody in the movie really does, to the best of their ability, what they can to bring the characters alive. And one that I'm really sad that wasn't able to show up in the sequels because of like creative differences, I guess, was that
Crispin Glover.
Yeah, and I guess he was actually kind of at odds with Robert Zemeckis, because he would play so nervous that he would stumble over his lines a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like right for the character. So I don't know. It's interesting to see how you could take something too far, I guess. But
something cool, interesting about Crispin Glover in this movie is, so Christopher Lloyd watches like Back to the Future. Apparently he watches it like a lot. Doc Brown, like he likes Back to the Future. Michael J. Fox is one of his most iconic performances. He watches this movie a lot. Everybody who's been in this movie like enjoys the film, and they will watch it like outside of like whatever. Crispin Glover has only ever seen the film one time, and that was like shortly after it got released, and then he has never watched it since.
Imagine how weird that must be to like watch your own movie over and over, though. Like, I mean, really?
Well, it's a.
I know there's
movie.
Probably like memories and stuff connected to it, but really, it's like I can imagine Michael J. Fox sitting down like every Like he sits down every Thanksgiving break with his family. And he's like, all right, we're going to watch Back to the Future. And his family's just like, Dad, again? Like, really? We've seen it like 20 times over the years.
It's like, a real good movie, though. Like,
this is my peak. Sit down.
Dude, let's be real. If you were in Back to the Future, you'd gloat about it. You'd have your kids watch it.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
I don't know.
A cool thing about that is like Michael J. Fox, he went to like China or Tibet or something like that for some like publicity tour or whatever, or like he went there on vacation or whatever. And this tribe of I guess it's not a tribe, but this group of Tibetan monks were like traveling through town, and they saw him, and one of them was like Marty McFly. Like he knew who Michael J. Fox was, and this guy was not only from like this very isolated part of the world, he immediately recognized Michael J. Fox and wanted an autograph.
I mean, who really looks like Michael J. Fox? I mean, I don't think anybody does.
That's true.
I don't know. And plus, he's pretty short, isn't he?
He's like 5'4".
Yeah, I imagine it's pretty easy to pick him out in the crowd.
It's crazy because he's 5'4" and Christopher Lloyd's like 6'1". That's why Christopher Lloyd like hunches over. That's why Doc Brown is always like hunched over in a lot of the shots they're together. It's so they could be framed together.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, fantastic movie. I've really enjoyed watching it. But I think it's time to move on.
I think it is. Would you like to give us the rundown for Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Well, as I said earlier, it's a movie about an adventurer, an archaeologist adventurer, Indiana Jones.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Who is addicted to an adventure. And when he can't get some golden pop figure or whatever it is that's sitting in that temple, he has to feed the addiction by going on to search for literally the most impossible artifact in the world in the Lost Ark so that the Nazis don't get a hold of it and destroy the world. You could not have higher stakes than that, I think.
They're pretty high because not only does he have to like fight the Nazis, he has to also, save an artifact that proves the existence of like God, basically. And,
yeah, well, him not, and on top of the fact that he doesn't believe in all that psycho mumbo jumbo or whatever he says in the movie.
Yeah, and also he has to get the girl at the end.
Of course, even though the girl hates him, loves him, and then hates him again.
Life happens.
Which I have to bring it up right now, by the way. It is interesting to go back after, this movie being out for almost, 40 years now.
Oh, shit, yeah.
Because that's 81. Yeah. Interesting to go back and think about.
That's 81. How old?
Yeah.
How old is fucking Han Solo or Harrison Ford? How old is he?
He's probably in his early 30s at the time, I believe.
I think he's like 35 in this, so he's got to be like 70 something. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, he's pretty up there now, but he's doing pretty well for the age and doing pretty well for having survived the plane crash. But
good on him. It'll take more than a plane crash to kill Indy, and let's be real here.
Interesting. He was at least 39, I think. 39, and he looks young in the movie. He looks really good.
That's that 70s weed for you, man. That stuff has preservatives in it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about that. Like Harrison Ford really didn't come out as a huge star until later in his.
Until he was like in his 30s, yeah.
Yeah. Well, because I know Star Wars was one of his breakout roles before this.
He was
aside from doing American
Graffiti.
Yeah, American Graffiti. It's like that was just 2 years before or so. So he was still in his late 30s, and then I guess American Graffiti he had to have been
in his late 20s or like at 30. Yeah.
Which is still interesting to think about the fact that he played a teenager in that movie, but
that he set the precedent for like 90s films to cast 30-year-olds to play like 17-year-olds.
Or even today on like ABC sitcoms where everybody is like 35, but they're like, I'm going through puberty.
Oh, so bad. So bad.
But he does really well playing it in this movie. And I don't know. I mean, the first thing you really have to talk about when talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark is that opening.
It is
because
such a good opening.
oh yeah, it's almost like it's like a short film in itself because like the golden rule goes that you're supposed to get your intro out of the way in a spec script like your first 3 to 5 pages, and this is like a 15-minute opening where it's like it does a lot to show off his character, which I think is super important for this movie.
And it still keeps him like mysterious for like the first like 5 minutes. Like I don't think he says a line until like what, like 7-8 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, and I think it's cool too because doing that you could probably run into a lot of problems with like the audience not really getting it and kind of thinking that other people, because first character you see on screen normally you think is either a villain or a good guy, and thankfully that there's that iconic shot right at the beginning of the outline of his hat, which by the way, love the use of shadows in this movie. That's something I noticed that is very interesting detail that I think added to the texture of the way they shot. Yeah, but I think having that right there and having the outline of that hat and the chiseled jaw really helps you understand. It's like, okay, we're about to go through something real quick, but this is the guy I'm going to be looking for. And obviously then when he walks out of the shadows in the opening a few minutes later, it's even better than it ever could have been.
Is that just like a thing? Is Harrison Ford like the like action or like nerd movie like action hero of all time?
I think he's just in general like the star of all time. I mean, really, when you think about it, is this guy?
He was Han Solo, which we could argue is like the most popular Star Wars character. And he was Indiana Jones, which you can argue is probably one of the most iconic like action heroes of the last like 50 years.
Of ever, really.
Ever, yeah. And like he like other than like he could have done just those 2 movies and cruised.
Oh, like, for the rest of his life.
The rest of his life. He could have just done like fan conventions forever and everybody would have been like, yeah, that's fine. You were Indian, you were Han, you're good.
Yeah, I don't know. It's because he is one of those actors that really has a love for acting while doing these more commercial movies like a Bruce Willis or somebody like this. But I'd be interested to know what he thought about the role of Indiana Jones, because I know Han Solo, it's like after that, I remember him saying that he thought Han should have died way sooner than he ever did. And obviously that turned into
him
a whole
dying
other
like
thing decades later. But yeah, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to know what he actually thought of Indiana Jones if he had the same sort of resentment because it was a commercial role. But it'd be interesting to see.
The big thing that's interesting is he was like the 3rd person to get offered the role of Indiana Jones.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was like, this is weird. So it was Tom Selleck got like, I think was the first person to get offered the role.
That's believable.
Yeah, and then like I think it was Nick Nolte was the second guy. And I was like, I can't really see Nick Nolte doing that, but then again, like I think Harrison Ford was like this is one of, I think Harrison Ford was meant to play Indiana Jones. Like that was like, that's like just like a perfect kind of like casting right there. And I think
I cannot picture Nick Nolte doing this. I just did a Google search and dude, it would have been a disaster. Oh my God.
Remember, this is 40 years ago. All right.
Even 40 years ago, Nick Nolte looks a little bit, he looks like somebody rough. He looks like somebody who would have been stuck in Cairo that Indy passed on the street begging for change. I don't know. And that's kind of insulting to Nick Nolte, but dude.
He looks a little rough.
He's a little rough around the edges. And Indy, even though he should be rough around the edges, I mean, he looks like a
$1 million
Adonis,
bucks.
Like he looks like $1 million bucks. But Selleck I could kind of see because Indiana Jones does seem like the kind of guy that would have a mustache like Tom Selleck all of the time.
Just rocking that like thick 80s mustache.
Yeah, but it would have been kind of, because I don't know if were mustaches like the handlebar mustache like he has, were those in fashion in 1936? Probably
no
not.
idea. I don't even think it matters, dude. It'd be lit.
But it would be very interesting to see him at the end walking down like the the Washington D.C. steps with the mustache on it, and everybody else around him being like, "Dude, you look silly. What are you doing?"
Yeah, nice.
Oh, you know what? Actually, mustaches probably were in fashion at the time because that was pre-World War II, and people probably still had that Hitler stash a little bit.
Just a little tiny Hitler stash.
Because that was around the time when he was like Time Man of the Year, so people were probably like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna get the mustache like this guy. He's super successful."
Dude, that was a thing that I couldn't. That was in the movie, and I couldn't really like figure was like, so the bad guys in the movies are a bunch of Nazis, right? They're
Yeah.
the Nazis, like big capital N Nazis. But like, I don't think they act like Nazis like most of the movie. Like they're dicks, they're the bad guys, but like
They're
I
just kind
think-
of like stormtroopers.
right? Like it feels like they could just you could have copy pasted like Russian like communists on them, and it would have been the same movie.
Yeah. Well, I think it was just like when you go back to a certain time period in any of these movies, there's always the
bad guy's the
stereotypical
Nazi.
bad guy, and then in the 30s it's always the Nazis, in the 50s and 60s, 70s it's always the Russians, and beyond that it's always Middle Eastern people, and it's like I don't know. I just think that that's a action movie trope that like it fits in such a like really when you think about it, Indiana Jones is a little campy the way it deals with a lot of its violence, but and it kind of needs to do that because if you put Indy through like some serious action, it probably wouldn't hold up as much. But there's kind of a cartoonish element because it's inspired by those,
The old serials from like the 1940s, 50s.
Because that's really where the inspiration for Star Wars and Indy came from, and why Spielberg and Lucas were so interested in both properties. But I don't know. What is interesting though, aside from all the stereotypical stuff, is there's actually a lot of things that this movie does to subvert some tropes, and I thought they were interesting. Like, one that I thought was cool is that moment where, because the one thing that I think a lot of people overlook is Indy's character flaw in the movie,
Mhm.
in that he's like addicted to finding the treasure. It's not just about the guy needs to find the treasure. It's that he literally is addicted to finding the treasure and will do whatever he can to get his hands on that sweet Jewish gold chest.
This is true because like when he's in the fucking canyon in Tunisia and the bad guy basically called his bluff and he's like, go ahead, you can blow up the Ark of the Covenant, but you want it as bad as I do. Like,
Exactly.
You do.
And that scene's one of the best ones in the movie because it's like, how much more intense can you get than aiming a rocket launcher at God's creation? Like, that's intense. And on top of that, it's like there's other parts of this movie that are subverted, like when he goes to save Marion when they're at the archaeological site. And it's the classic, damsel in distress moment. He's about to save the girl, but then he chooses to let her stay in danger because he's like, I need to get to the treasure. It's very interesting realizing that. It's like, wow, they really could have made that like a sappy romantic moment, and then the girl has to come along on the journey. But it kind of is good because it ramps up the conflict even more.
Yeah.
Which is so important when constructing a story, is to make sure that the conflict is there, but also makes a lot of sense and is raised as high as possible. I mean, it's a similar thing in Back to the Future because obviously the end of that movie, Marty's plan to fake assault his mom in the car, which is an interesting first choice instead of just like being a dick to her at the dance. But
yeah, like,
it's
a little weird.
Yeah, but it's pushing the gas pedal as far down as you can on the conflict, making sure that the audience isn't going to get bored. And it's the same thing. It's like, are you going to get the girl and then go get the treasure? No, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You need to be able to sacrifice something at the end of a good story. And both do that because Marty gets to sacrifice this kind of cool guy life that he had before all this in order to get what he wants, but Indy has to do the same and sacrifice witnessing the power of God in order to continue living, instead of falling victim to that, that cracked out addiction to treasure.
Yeah. Also, like, would the movie have just like solved? Would the conflict have just solved itself if Indy was just didn't do anything?
I don't know, because that's something I thought about a lot too. Is like
Because
because
think about it like this: like if Indy was the one who had to like find the Ark of the Covenant, like the Nazis were digging a whole other section of like the desert, and he had to like physically find it. So the Nazis probably weren't gonna find the Ark, and then he was the only one who actually had like the medallion that told him how tall the staff was to even get that far, and they had half the medallion on the guy's hand.
right.
And when they do get the Ark of the Covenant, if he just let them open it, like you saw the head explodey bad stuff, like could he have just like if he just took Marion like in Cairo and just like took her out of and got her to safety, could they have just like waited it out until like the Nazis went to like Skull Island and just died? Like just showed up like 20 minutes after and just took the Ark and bailed?
It is certainly interesting to think about that, because like I think that's part of the flaw argument where a lot of people overlook the fact that Indy has to get the treasure, like that's all he really cares about. And it's like, for example, if you want to go backwards in the story real quick, is that scene where he's about to go on the trip to go get the Ark, and he's approved to go on the trip. He starts packing the suitcase, and he's like, the dialogue in that scene is really focused on talking about if we're getting the Ark in order to study it, or if we're getting the Ark because this will be the greatest thing I can ever get my hands on. And Indy obviously is talking about it like it's going to be the greatest thing he ever does. And I think Indy really is, even though it's not apparent otherwise, narcissistically, you know, I think he feels like he can't be himself if he's not after the treasure. Because what is he without that? He's, you know, a professor at a college and
Nondescript city.
yeah, and it's that's true, because it looks like Harvard, but who knows. Also, on that note, is he actually at a college? Because what college has a late bell and like a class over bell at the end of it? That's such a weird detail that they put in that scene when he's in the classroom.
No, the weird detail in that scene is like how all the girls in that scene are aggressively just eye fucking Professor Jones in that scene. The girl who has like "love you" like drawn on her eyelids. I'm like, that girl, huh?
I would do that though. Harrison Ford is godly in this movie.
Yes, no, don't get me wrong. I'm sure many men would go gay for 1980s era Harrison Ford. Let's be real here, but like that girl had to get up in the morning and draw that on her eyelids, looking into the mirror, get it right so it'd be not only spelled correctly and facing the right directions, but thick and visible enough for Indiana Jones to be able to read it from across the room and know what was going on. Like, let's be real. Do you think Indiana Jones is plowing students like left and right? Like when that door is closed?
Well, because he's put off by it in the scene, so I think he's like, it's weird because Indiana Jones is I would imagine men from that era, knowing the men from that era, would be totally like, I'm going to take advantage of this. But Indy is almost like put off by it, where he's like,
this is
listen,
weird.
You're not a golden chest that has the power of God in it, so I'm not going to touch you. But let's play a little game here. I want to see, and here's a game that we could honestly play for the future. I want to see the deleted scene where she puts on the eyeliner and then goes to like the school cafeteria or the local diner beforehand, and then she's having scrambled eggs and coffee and closes her eyes for a little too long, and the guy behind the counter in the cook station sees it and he's like, love you. And then he's like, I'm gonna get this girl's number, I'm gonna send her some flowers. And then she gets flowers and it's like, this backfired.
Yeah. No, the real deleted scene for these two movies that I want to see. Okay, it's Back to the Future. I want to see the morning after, for George waking up after Marty convinces him that aliens exist and they want him to go out with Lorraine at the dance. Because let's be real here, George gets up the next day and he looks disheveled, broken, defeated as a human being. He's now convinced aliens exist. How did that breakfast go with his parents? Where they're like, oh, so how was your night last night? And he's just like, I saw Darth Vader. he tried to melt my brain with rockin' 80s music.
And then his parents are like, all right, we got to schedule a lobotomy on this kid. He's going crazy. Especially because in the 1950s, too, being such a loner, they're probably already like, listen, he stays home all the time. He's just watching
Mystery theater.
Science. Yeah, science theater. And I don't know. He's just, this kid's kind of a lost cause. Maybe you should start all over again.
This movie gets really dark if you just follow like George McFly.
When you go around the corner from the main characters, things can get pretty dark pretty quickly. Because the other thing too is like, I wonder if here's another deleted scene idea. Does that girl have a shrine of Indiana Jones in her home where she like keeps the apple cores from that which he eats after his students leaves on? She's like, I love him so much, please God. It's like that'd be. There's the Indiana Jones thriller concept for you, the spinoff.
Yes, where this really obsessive like college girl, because this isn't like random like, okay, she's like high school, middle school, whatever. She's like a sophomore and she's just like in love with her professor, love struck. This is a college age girl, all right, and she is like DTF for one of her professors, and like to an obsessive point, and he's like, nah, fool, like.
I don't know. It's like the title idea for that spinoff thriller, Indiana Jones and the Legend of the Hidden Room in the Basement of the House.
That's where the shrine is. That's where all the skin suits are.
Yeah.
So weird.
I don't know. All jokes aside, though, another thing that I noticed about Raiders of the Lost Ark that I was surprised by, but ended up thinking was really cool, is the amount of violence in this movie. Can we talk about the violence? I
noticed that. Okay, I know we glossed this over, but when was the first or last time you saw Raiders of the Lost Ark? Like, how long has it been?
Like I told you before, I think it had to have been 5th grade, elementary school sometime.
Okay. I'm in like the same boat. Like I don't think I've seen this movie all the way through since like middle school, if that. But like, I'm watching this movie and like, Indy murders like everyone in this movie. Like
a lot of people gruesomely die, not just like murder, like Stormtrooper, like Wilhelm scream and they fall off screen. It's like there are multiple gory scenes in this movie that challenge a lot of horror movies at the time.
Like in the opening sequence, when Doc Ock is like betrays Indiana Jones trying to receive
Alfred
the
Molina's cameo in the movie, by the way. That's an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah, Doc Ock and Indiana Jones were in a movie, and I want to see that superhero crossover. But in that opening scene, like when Indy hops over and crosses in, we see him like impaled by like 7 spikes, like gruesomely impaled, and he is like all the way dead. Yeah. And like after that, we see Indy like into the fight in Cairo where he just straight up just murders a dude for like waving a sword around.
Or beyond that, it's like there's like a point blank shot in this movie that's really close shot of just a guy being shot in the head while he's driving the truck, and it's like that's pretty jarring on itself. But not only that, but then the guy that gets torn to bits in the propeller. In that really awesome scene, by the way, where the plane fight in it. Because here's another thing too that I want to bring up is that the special effects in this movie really run the gambit for quality style. Like
they go from like being really good, like hold up today good, to being like this was bad in 1981 standards.
Yeah, because you have a lot of things like the good examples, right? That first opening where like the giant boulder itself is super good. Like even looking at it now, it's fairly good for what it is at the time.
Well, the whole set design in that opening is like perfect. Everything looks good.
Or even like, because we just talked about it, the plane scene where they're fighting while the plane's rotating around the airstrip, that is also really good because of the explosions, the fact that they got this huge prop and were able to blow it up, the
ramping action of everything that's going on.
Yeah, and then you also have scenes on the other end of the spectrum, like when they are almost ready to enter the Temple of the Covenant, and the sky in the background,
looks so like the matte painting.
Yeah, like that. And the shots that go between Indy and Sala are really blatantly green screened, but like B movie level green screen.
Yeah.
I don't know that, or like in general the climax scene too kind of runs the gamut for quality, because some of it is the standard for the era where things are kind of not, they weren't the digital effects yet, but they were like
Cool.
post added, like
Yeah.
for all the lightning and the souls moving around,
Like rotoscope, like really early like digital effect.
But then it's like you have the faces melting, which cheesy, sure, but actually looks pretty good and pretty scary. So I'll let that one go. But it's like
When the guy's head explodes though, because it is such like an obvious like plastic head.
Yeah, and speaking of gore, it's like that one's pretty. But those are all pretty cool. I mean, you know, I think the one that gets me in that scene is the ghoul that goes up to
the
like
camera.
right up to the screen close, and then the face changes. It's just like, I don't know. It reminds me of just like a haunted house. It's I don't know. It's very interesting because I'd love to know if it was just like the technology difference or if it was a budget thing. But like they do have a lot of special effects that would have been really good for the time, and then that would have been kind of for the time. But
yeah,
I mean, I have to. I'll give an excuse to the bad stuff because the good stuff, it's outstanding.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the effects in this movie, so have you ever seen the Raiders of the Lost Ark fan film?
No, I haven't. The one where they remake it shot for shot, right?
Yeah, it's shot for shot. Do you know the story about it?
Kind of, but why don't you say it anyway? Yeah.
Okay, so back when this film came out in 1981, right? These kids who lived in like Louisiana or like somewhere, one of them went and saw the movie, loved it so much that he went and saw it like 6 times and wrote the entire movie out on like notebook paper, like scripted out the entire film. And he was like, yo, me and my friends are gonna shoot this movie. We're gonna make a shot for shot remake of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think they got like a VHS camera from like their parents or whatever, and they go and shoot it. But the thing is, like, these are like 10-year-old kids in like the middle of nowhere, but they are like adamant about, no, it needs to be exactly the same. It needs to be just like the movie, to the point where one of them like lights their friend on fire in like the bar scene. Like he just gets lit on fire, and they light their whole basement on fire. And when one of them gets their older brother to drive like a pickup truck and drag one of the other ones behind it, like Indiana Jones gets dragged by the truck in the movie. So they're getting dragged on like this country road in like, you know, Louisiana or whatever, and they get a decommissioned like army truck that I guess was like abandoned in the middle of nowhere because that's just what's in the South, and they crash that and they push it off of like a cliff that was by the house that they lived on.
Gosh.
Yeah, and they did everything, and it took them like 10 years to do it, because you get to see them change from like being 10-year-olds to like the next shot they're like 15 to the next shot they're like 18. And because they filmed it over like 10 years, like every summer they had for like 10 years was them filming the movie, and they got their friends and stuff to be in it too, except for the plane scene, which they just filmed like 5 years ago. Like they got the whole gang back together, like, yo, I got a line on a decommissioned airplane we can use for that scene, and finish the movie.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and they blew it up. They got a real plane, set up the whole thing exactly as is. They actually went to Steven Spielberg to ask him how he made that scene work. And yeah, they finished the movie. It took them like 30 something years to actually make the Raiders of the Lost Ark fan film perfect shot for shot.
I'll have to check that out, because I'd be really interested to see how well they covered up the age difference. I mean, that'd be hilarious.
It's not even mentioned, dude. Like it just goes from like 10-year-old kid walking out of the shadows as Indiana Jones, and then he's running through the temple with a boulder behind him, and he's like 16. Which reminds me, the boulder prop actually holds up, apparently. Like that was they actually built a giant like 12-foot tall fiberglass boulder to chase him.
I don't know. It's like really, there's a lot of things that are very interesting about both these movies that hold up so well. I mean, they're instant classics, really, but it's visually, there's some really interesting things that I just wish they would still do today. Like the editing today can get very rushed, and it can get very, everything has to
Choppy.
be packed full of moments and action and information, so that the audience is never getting bored. But I almost like these movies where I can get a quiet moment, or where I can get a character moment. Because as an example of one blockbuster recently that had that, the episode 9, Star Wars episode 9, was really quickly paced and really had no moments to breathe, to just sit and breathe.
Yeah.
But these movies really give you a lot of moments, especially Back to the Future, to just kind of sit in
There's a lot
what
of
just
character
happened.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And, when that really quiet soundtrack comes up with the piano, and it's whimsical, and I don't know. I mean, this is the foundation for a lot of movies after this, but I really wish that they would take a lot more lessons from how they made these movies. Because these are like the blueprint for how to get an audience to love a film.
That's true. These films are not only loved, they are beloved. Like everyone loves these movies. Like there's people out there who don't like these movies, and they're wrong, but
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, if you don't like these movies, you can't have fun. Like, that's what
Yeah.
these movies are at their core, is they're fun on
They're
top of
fun.
everything else that they can do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the only other thing I could say too is that the deleted scene I'd love to see for this movie is after Nazi Monkey dies because of the poison dates.
Yes.
I want to see, because the guy that poisons the dates is the owner of the monkey. I want to see him come back into the room and realize he's killed his own monkey. And
I want to see him give that monkey a Nazi military funeral in the middle of Cairo. That monkey was an officer in the Nazi army.
And everybody else in the city is just being like, dude, this guy's an outcast. I don't really know what's going on with him. But he's always been kind of troubled. He speaks to his only friend was a monkey, for God's sakes. It's like, what?
I want to see the tiny monkey coffin that this guy has for him. All right, that needs to be a thing.
Oh man.
So I got a fun little thing for you. So these two movies, both of them at the time of release, they grossed worldwide during the run $400 million each. All right, both of them very successful. But which one of these movies do you think was more expensive to make? Like, which one had the bigger budget?
That's a good question. Let me lay out my justification for what will become my answer. So, Back to the Future has a lot more visual effects to deal with, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It was shot in a backlot, though, for most of the movie.
Yeah. It was also filmed a couple years later than...
And filmed a few years later. It's a lot more of a quiet movie, so they could use different sets like homes. But I don't know if there's more set design necessarily. Okay, on the transverse side, you have Indiana Jones. Bigger stars, I think, in this movie. You have, because Harrison Ford at that point was a star. You have a lot more, because there's a lot more setup with the way they do their stunts. I'm gonna go with Indiana Jones, but I feel like I'm wrong.
Sir, would you like to try a number?
That's way beyond my pay grade.
I gotcha. In Raiders of the Lost Ark was cheaper to make by $1 million. Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981 cost $18 million to make. 1984-5, when Back to the Future was made, cost $19 million.
What they do, buy actual plutonium or uranium for the car? It's like, what? How do you spend that much money?
They had 4 cars for the DeLorean. It was like
yeah,
3
but
or
does
4
that
cars.
amount to 19 million? It's like,
yeah,
that's interesting, because that's also surprised me how cheap. Well, I don't know about adjusting for inflation, but that sounds pretty cheap for Indiana Jones.
It's true. Took $20 million.
Inflation check, because
these numbers, by the way, are sourced from movie aggregation sources, so they're relatively accurate.
Let's see here. 18 million. I hope I'm getting that right. No, I don't want $18 in 1981.
$18.91. Jesus Christ.
Or whatever it is. So let's see. Adjusted for inflation, $18 million in 1981 would be $53.5 million today. That's still pretty low end for a blockbuster, though.
For a blockbuster film? Yeah, actually, wait. Like, because I know there are films made nowadays that are like...
Oh, they're insane.
Yeah, for like $100 million, right?
Yeah, because this is like a marquee blockbuster, not just talking about like a Bad Boys reboot blockbuster.
Yeah, these are also films that are like, oh, we're gonna start, we're gonna start a franchise with these, and it's insanity. I'm honestly curious, like how many films nowadays are made for like relatively the same amount of money.
Honestly, you could probably make it. That's probably what most regular dramas are made for now.
Yeah,
because I'm looking here, and the average budget for those Avengers movies, which are kind of the marquee blockbuster nowadays, Avengers was made 220, and every other Avengers movies after that is above 300 million for a budget. Which they expected those movies to go out and make $1 billion, but it's like, I don't know. It's kind of insane to think about the difference.
It's true
that those can make. And that, honestly, you can get just as much as fun and action out of it without having to go all... And that's not to say that I don't like that Avengers do that, because A, it's a superhero movie. You have to. But B, they look great. So
yeah,
that's not talking any smack on that. But I don't know. It's certainly interesting to think about how much less money can be spent on a film that gets just as much bang for the buck.
It's true, because like that's the thing about these movies that I noticed was like, however much these movies cost, they spend it real well. Like you can tell the money's on screen. No one's doing like crazy backyard accounting on this one.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's certainly... It's interesting too. I guess we'll move into the part where we kind of
figure out which is the better
in these movies.
Yeah.
The interesting thing I always go back to when watching these is that what I was talking about earlier, and I think that there's certainly a lot from these films that people have kind of lost to making movies a super commercial success. And while these movies were meant to be made for that commercial summer blockbuster hit, it's like there's Avengers aside, a lot of blockbusters nowadays don't put as much thought into making sure that they're written well. Yeah. All the reboots that keep coming up end up being knocked on for their writing first and foremost. And that's not to say it's anybody's specific fault, because who knows if it's the writers or the producers or whoever. It's a long and complicated process to make those things. But it's certainly interesting to me how those kinds of really important baseline foundations for the movie can get lost in the middle of making sure it's a commercial success. And these movies did that even without sacrificing that, and then became two examples on how to do it perfectly. I don't know. It's tough to think about which one is the better movie as a result, because they are kind of different. They are both iconic blockbusters, but you have one that's an action movie, and then one that's
a sci-fi comedy.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about what the category would be for Back to the Future, but for my own purposes, I think I'd have to choose Back to the Future every time, just because it has a bit more of a special place in my heart as far as, finding it when I did and being interested in film as a result of it. Especially because, too, I like that Back to the Future gets a little bit more intimate with the story, in that it can say other things other than what's going on in the plot. It has a little bit more resonance after you stop watching the movie. Thinking about who your parents are, and that you never really know who people are until you know their whole story. I think it's a really powerful theme that it kind of shows up throughout the story and that it sends you on your way with. So I guess that would be my choice, is Back to the Future.
All right. I would have to agree with you. Mine is, it has a special place in my heart's favorite movie. It has been for 20 something years.
Yeah.
But I think the cast in Back to the Future is just so good, like across the board. Which doesn't say, Raiders of the Lost Ark, they didn't have, great acting in the film, but the acting in Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's a few more of those, like, I get why this guy is the bad guy, but he is not like villainous at all. Then, and the other thing, it's like Back to the Future, I think the writing is like way tighter, the script's a lot better than Raiders. Raiders is, it's a big action film, it's it's fun, but there's things in the film that are little inconsistencies and stuff like that where it's just like, okay, and it feels like Raiders could be cut up into like a serial series, like the it's based on, and it would probably still fit if you just put it on like TV.
Yeah.
Whereas Back to the Future feels a lot more like a complete and holistic film, even with the teaser at the end for a sequel, which, by the way, they had no idea they were ever going to make a sequel to Back to the Future when it got released. Yeah.
I don't know. It is interesting to think about how they were, because it really feels like they were banking on it by the feel of that end. I mean, they're blatantly pointing towards another adventure, whether that means another movie or not.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I could see what you mean by that. Definitely.
All right. So, yeah, I guess this episode comes to a very, nice ending. We have now decided that the greatest blockbuster of the 1980s, the Battle of the Titans, is won by Back to the Future. Sorry, Indy. Try again next time.
And that's the power of love.
That is the power of love. All right.
Well, this episode of Double Feature Podcast has come to a close. It is our first episode, so thank you for listening. We're hoping to do these weekly, and next week we're coming back with the Battle of the Geek movies, sort of, in Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and then another film that Dean pointed out to me called Fanboys.
Yes. Fanboys is a film based on the release of Phantom Menace back in 1999, and these guys' quest to get the preview showing of Phantom Menace before anybody else. They want to see Star Wars Episode 1 before the rest of the world does. And Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, I'm sure I probably don't have to explain the movie, but, it's about Scott Pilgrim, who's this rock guy in Canada, with the worst haircut ever. Worst haircut on the planet, trying to win the love of Ramona Flowers by fighting off her 7 evil exes in a fun video game, comic book kind of world. So yeah.
It'll be an interesting one. So if you want to watch those movies this week so you can follow along with us, and until next time, that was the Double Feature Podcast. Thank you for listening and tuning in. Dean, it was a pleasure.
Pleasure too. You guys have a good one.
All right. Bye, guys.